approves the eco package change.
Okay, so we're all right. Okay. Hello. Should I join the? That's my screenshot.
Yes.
Hey, Scott.
Hey guys,
How's it
how
going?
you doing?
How about okay. I'm not able to garner much crowd, I guess. Okay, let's see.
I think you're very interesting.
Thank you. Okay, so just to go quickly through some status. So on my side, Galley proper, let's call it theoretical code is done. Code is done. So it is the server side can serve insecure traffic. So it can. So I have a PR out that allows us to drive Galley through a purely metadata model, listening to, like, describing the things that we need to listen to in a metadata format. So that is out. So that should cover all the types that's currently known, but it is prone to getting out of sync with as we make changes to the APIs and CRDs. And then I have a follow-up PR, a cleanup PR to tighten the metadata model so that you don't accidentally create, like, inject wrong coding in the metadata model. And then going forward, I am planning to work on the on mixer integration for MCP. So, and
Yeah.
John,
So MCP server implementation is done. Client implementation is should be in today once it's reviewed.
Okay.
And then I'm planning to work on getting it integrated into Mixer and Pilot. So as we can sync up on the Mixer part,
Okay.
I'll sync up with Andrew on the Pilot part. What our timeline is for that? At least we can get an initial version working.
Okay.
And then the corresponding, I think we wanted to have a test client for MCP as well, just to debug some of this stuff.
Yeah, actually, I started one in Galley, but I was waiting until your PR to land. It's a very simple thing. We can just expand on it.
Okay. Yeah, we'll get that hooked up.
Yeah.
And then also the test server, file-based server, which we can decide if we want to do that in Galley itself or as a standalone
Which one?
thing. Like a file-based server or an in-memory-based server.
Okay.
Short term, what we want to do. So if we just want to test Pilot without starting all Galley through Kubernetes.
I think we can go either way. For in-memory one, I think what you already have is probably enough.
I guys think if we want to hook it up to, I guess for file-based, we want to hook it up to a file launcher.
Yeah, so I mean, within the MCP folder, we can create like a file-based implementation, I think, and anybody can just now create a wrapper around it and create a service out of it, right? Seems like the most expedient thing to do.
Yeah, the MCP server right now is not type aware. It's generic to the enveloped resources. So we need to have some text-specific data to pump that through.
Yeah. Okay.
So that, and then on the validation side, cleaning up loose ends for Ornetto. So there's some telemetry we're adding, some some additional configuration options for the validation hook and docs.
Okay. Yeah, so folks, I actually have a, I've been working on a document for some time, just trying to kind of rationalize some of the like validation related stuff that I think both we are doing and we need to do. So I captured the document. I'm not going to go over the document in detail. So I know I signed it right before the meeting, so there's not enough time to actually have an in-depth discussion about the document. But I just want to quickly go over it. And if you have any comments on it, please feel free to leave it on the document. And then if there is enough contention, then we can discuss further in the next meeting, maybe. But the idea is, okay, can we actually rationalize the config validation strategy in Istio, right? So we actually had a lot of organically grown code, both in Mixer and Pilot, for doing validation. You know, it actually tried to do its, you know, things that in a bit of an interesting way, which I don't think is healthy, right? One example is we tried to do referential integrity checks, but we kind of did it haphazardly, so it was not easy. We eventually decided to essentially not do that. So I decided to write this document capturing the principles and then kind of discuss what we can do in this space. So the main thing is, like, there's a lot of discussion about validation. Whenever we start talking about validation, it starts to, you know, go into the, you know, oh, like, you know, we need to validation at this level, like, okay, let's put a stake in the ground. Validation that we are talking about is at the ingestion time through the API server. That is the validation that we're interested in. So there might be other points in which validation can be extremely useful, which is great. We should do that. It's just that this is not the scope for it. So it needs to be a static operation. We shouldn't, like, validation should be based on the static information that's available rather than looking at some runtime state that might be, you know, changing over time. So if you don't do that, essentially you end up in a place where you can admit something that is because of some healthy state now, which can become unhealthy in the future, and, you know, your validation is not effectively broken. So just to keep things simple, one of the principles is to keep the validation scope to a single resource. We have a lot of code actually in currently available in the validation where it tries to look at other resources, especially with referential integrity, right? So there's a description of what's wrong with referential integrity and those kinds of things here. So essentially the gist of it is, look, we should just look at a single resource at a time to make a decision about whether that thing is valid or not. And then the rest of the document is about how to violate that principle in a principled way. So the idea is, okay, let's do single resource validation first, right? And let's start with whatever is available. So Kubernetes actually have a CRD validation mechanism starting in 1.9 based on open API schemas. So I think this is a great, like, a first line validation thing. And if we can actually satisfy the validation needs using this only, great, we should just do that. But if it's not something that we can do, there are certain things that actually we can't do just purely based on this, right? So we already have an admission controller based model, Kubernetes admission controller based model here. That's currently implemented in Galley. It's like online now. It's right, you know, it's currently validating configuration, but it has some custom code that it's pulling from Pilot and Mixer. So the idea is, okay, can we kind of generalize this thing, right? So the things that we can do is we can look at things in a case-by-case basis. One case as the Mixer adapter configuration and Mixer instances, template definitions, right? So for those, Mixer is already moving towards a model where there's a set of meta definition resources for these things. So, is there a comment? All right. So essentially, the idea is maybe we can put additional information in these resources so that the admission controller can actually read the constraints from those resources and then apply them. So the canonical example is the handler configuration, right? So Mixer actually supports configurations for handlers. These are third-party resources and code. So we don't know the constraints a priori, right? We don't know the constraints of that we should apply. So these can be described in a CRD by itself that describes the adapter, right? Saying that, okay, whatever configuration it needs to be supplied needs to comply with this open API spec, right? And then our admission controller can actually look into that resource saying that, oh, like, whenever a resource of this particular type comes in, I'm going to apply this open API spec, right? So it's a very generalized mechanism. It just says the source of we just need to know the source CRD that contains the spec and the destination CRD that we should apply the spec to. And then the final one is we have an expression validation problem. So in the template definitions, we have expressions that needs to be validated. So the hook is currently doing this, but this is about kind of generalizing and rationalizing it a bit more. The idea is, for the templates, we are just going to look at the template definition, and then we are going to also look at the attributes available to us, and then we can create a somewhat generic infrastructure that actually walks over that, grows over that, and then it validates that the expressions are of the right type. Essentially, this is the gist of the document, and I just want to show a little prototype that I did to kind of enable this work. So one main problem that we have here is, okay, so these, like, if you want to create, for example, the Open API specifications, right? There's no good way to plumb things from up top at this point, right? So I started developing some tooling around this, and I'm happy to get your feedback on it. But the main idea is in the APIs repo, we can actually create some, we can annotate our resource specs using some options, like proto options. This is one example of it. And the example is we actually have a bunch of options. You say, hey, here's a spec. The kind is this. There's some metadata. This is the group. This is the version. Is it namespaced? From the same proto, I can actually create two different CR specs, right? So this is the second one I can create. And when I run the tool, I can actually create interesting metadata about this, right? So I can actually create the CRD definitions, right? So this is the CRD definitions that were created from the from the proto that I showed earlier, right? So there are actually two of them. So one of them for the top one for the bottom one. So this is the regular proto stuff that's created out of it. But in addition to this, we can actually create enough glue code so that we can use Kubernetes' own API machinery to generate client libraries for our resources, which we don't have today. So this has been an ask, which is essentially people want to be able to programmatically access Istio custom resources and be able to CRUD on them. It's just that we don't have the APIs for it. We can't generate the APIs for it. So this allows us to actually create the APIs for it as well. Yeah, so I actually have yet another prototype for that one here. Hold on. Where's it at? Tools, there we go. All right, so it's the same idea here. I have the proto here. This is an older example that I had. So we create this envelope, and then we can point the Kubernetes code generator to this envelope, right? So let me start from up top. So this is a primitive message tagged as a resource. We create an envelope out of it, which the Kubernetes machinery understands. It says we need to generate a client for this. And then once we run the client generator, we can actually create these client sets, the Kubernetes API-like APIs targeting our resources. It also allows us to hang the open API specifications for validations as well. You can imagine expanding the tool so that just by looking at the structure of the proto, we can actually create an open API spec. In addition, we can use some proto annotations to further capture some constraints so that they can be placed in the CRD definition as well. So all in all, we should be able to put all of our metadata into the API repo and generate all of the interesting artifacts from there, and validation related stuff being one of them. So, okay. I'd be happy to field any questions, concerns. If not, feel free to comment on the documents. We are heavily understaffed right now. I'm not sure how much time we can spend on this, but this is one of the areas that I think if we spend some time on it, I mean, it will actually help with the project health quite a bit.
So if this integrates directly with the Kubernetes machinery, then the kube control CLI will actually give errors back to the operator.
No, so that's a different. Oh, are you talking about the validation?
Yeah.
Yes. So that's the main idea. So in the CRD definitions, starting with 1.9, you can actually put open API specs, and right. API machinery will directly apply those. And if it fails, you're going to get an error message.
Okay, that'd be very useful.
Yeah. So we do that today for some things, but there's all with the webhook that we're shipping with 1.0.
Yeah,
so,
I just know that is something that I've run into several times, where bad config just goes in and things don't work, and then you have to kind of investigate in the logs and figure out why.
Yeah, so I think the key point is with 1.0, that shouldn't be. We should go from nothing to something decent, but what we have is ad hoc, and it's consistently applied, and there's architectural things that need to be cleaned up from that.
Right. Yeah. Well, part of the problem is I almost always use kube control instead of Istio control. So I think Istio control does some more validation than kube does.
Yeah, or actually, right now it's the same validation. With 1.0, what Istio control does in terms of validation is the same thing that the server-side validation will do. Except it's not consistently applied. So like we're still not checking mixer config. It's only file config. I think there's some other nice things about teaching Kubernetes our schemas. There's some talk about doing server-side apply. I don't know what state that's in. But if the server is aware of our schema, then it can do more intelligent merges. So if you wanted to do a patch or apply, we don't. That doesn't work for CRDs right now, as far as I know. But in order for that to work, Kubernetes needs to understand the structure of our data. So in addition to validation, we get that as well, which is nice.
Right, that makes sense. But all of this is non-contextual. It's just purely validating the config in a vacuum, correct?
Yes. Yeah. I think the contextual.
I mean, yeah, it doesn't understand the state of the system or anything like that. It's just purely.
Right.
Yes, but so there are certain things like validation of like templates, for example. We need access to some definition of what that template should look like, right? And that's not something that you can statically capture in a CRD. It needs to somehow inject it into the system as we add more templates, right? So for that purpose, we already have some CRs. So you can imagine those CRs being system state as well. Does that make sense?
Right, yeah.
Righty then. Okay, folks, if you have any comments, any feedback, any interest in implementing this, which is also interesting, please let us know.
And you switch to bi-weekly.
Yes. Also, we switched the meeting to bi-weekly. So instead of like canceling every week, I think we can. This will work out better. All right. With that, I say bye.
All right. Thanks, guys.
All right. See you guys around.